Hi, it's Mr. Canada, today, and we're going to do bearings and scale diagrams. Today we're going to learn how to draw and measure accurately with the protractor, correct ruler use. We can understand bearings and the rules, so that means putting them in three figure, all the compass points, so 4 point, 8 point, and 16 point. Understand that they always measure from north, measure clockwise, know that we go from to can be changed from to from if we swap up the variables. Then we can find our bearings from a diagram to a bearing, find our angles from a bearing to an angle, draw our bearings. So if we're given a bearing, can we draw it? So reverse bearings, if we're given A from B, we want to write it as B from A. Measuring scale diagrams. So if we have a scale diagram, can we set out what the scale and what the bearing is, and then the reverse process of given or actually drawing them given the list of information. So to begin today, though, we are going to talk about measuring angles. So as you notice here, we have two protractors. One on the left-hand side is a hemisphere semicircle 180-degree protractor. On the right is a full circle protractor. Notice both have an inside scale and an outside scale, right? We'll go through these points after. Both have a center point or origin, or I sometimes refer to these as the crosshairs, and then both of them are going to be able to measure some sort of angles. Well, the reason we have an inside and outside scale, I will let you know in a little bit. So, as I said, all the parts that are very handy for A, knowing how and what angle we're going to measure, B, how are we going to actually start this process, and C, the proper use. So, outer scale. So we use the outer scale when we have angles facing that way. That is because we want to have this as our 0 point, so 0 degrees, and then we'll measure up to some angle. Conversely, if we have an angle the opposite way, it would make more sense to have our 0 point start here, which is our inner scale. Right? If you notice, we have our origin or crosshair right in the center. This is where we're going to line it up with our pivot point of or our corner of our angle. So the part I've just indicated in red on both of the poorly made diagrams is what we line up for our crosshair underneath, right? And then the baseline, that helps us line up with the bottom part of our angle, with our 0 line, okay? No matter what one, if we're using the left case, that's where we line up our baseline here, and the right case, we'd line up our baseline with that one. Obviously over top of it, so you actually couldn't see our angle line. Now, how are we actually going to measure these angles? So, for you, just draw any acute angle, so that's any angle less than 90 degrees, and follow along. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to place the protractor on the page so that the baseline matches up with the bottom. So, this is going to look something like this. I'm just going to make my protractor bigger. So, you see this baseline right here. You see our baseline, right? We want to line it up at the bottom. So we want to line it up here, right? Just along this bottom line. I know I'm deviating a little bit, but just dragging it back and forth. Now, like I said, we want to have this crosshair in the middle, right? Or our origin, line up with our vertex point. So we want it to line up here, right? So if we use the baseline and that little center marker, we can line up and measure our angle as such. So when we're right there, then we look up at our line up here, right, and just follow it down to see whereabouts we are. So here, I'm one tick before this little half tick in between 130 and 140. Well, if I know that half this tick right here beside it is 135, then one tick over is just 136. So, here, we're going to record 136 degrees so I can remember it for after with my diagram. Notice I did use the inside scale because my my angle started over there being the 0 degree. So we wanted to set it at 0 degree, right? So that's how I chose to count up on the inside scale. If it was faced the other way, we'd have to pick our zeros there, right? So 136 degrees. The very last thing we always want to do is label it on your diagram, because that kind of indicates, well, I know it's 136 degrees. I've answered the question. They know what you're talking about, that angle, because you've drawn it on the given diagram. So next we're going to measure an obtuse angle. So same process. Draw yourself an obtuse angle. So that's any angle between 90 and 180, and then measure it. So here we're going to place it right on that, the crosshair right where the baseline connects with our other angle. And so once it's on, actually positioned nicely on it, it'll take a little bit of moving around. Then we can see what we're measuring. But notice how we don't actually extend, our line isn't actually long enough for a protractor. So what you have to do here is, you obviously can't switch your protractor size like I can. If this ever happens to you, take away your protractor for a sec, get out your straight edge, and then extend your line, okay? So all you do is just take a straight edge, and you just extend your line on top of it. Okay. So then we put it back on. Now we can finally see, oh, we can see where our line is matching up. I'm just shrinking my line a bit so I can see accurately. So we're at 50, 1, 2, 3. Oh, we're at 53. Oh, but I'm measuring from the left-hand scale. That's incorrect because we have to start here on a right for a 0 point. So really, make sure I'm looking at the inside here. So I look at the inside scale. I'm past 120, but not quite at 130. So I'm 120. I see my 5 mark. 6, 7. So I'm 127 degrees for mine. So if you cannot see why I'm 127 degrees, stop and make sure you can before continuing. Once again, I'm just writing this off to the side so I don't forget it. That way I can copy it on afterwards. So 127 degrees. And last example, example 3, draw yourself a reflex angle. Right? So here, same idea. We're going to put it on our 0 point and, well, measure over. Well, this is weird. This isn't our 0 point anymore, is it? So where is our 0 point? Well, one thing we can do is we could rotate our protractor so we have a 0 point, right? But that's still not going to help us too much. A little trick, if you ever have to do reflex angles, is measure the angle you don't want. So what I mean by that is we want this red angle, right? So I'm just going to say, well, this is the angle we don't want, right? Because no matter what, you're going to have to do some maths one way or the other. So this is the way I like doing it, instead of the other way method is you could flip your protractor upside down and then measure, or I guess you could have it here. You can measure the opposite angle, but anyway, you're going to measure one kind of matching pair of angles that equal 180. So I'm choosing to measure the smaller angle because I don't have to turn the protractor on its side. So here, once again, I'm going to have to actually extend my line because I know it's not long enough. So here, extend my line, and I can move it back over, and I see, well, I'm in between. Well, if I'm starting at 0, I'm counting up the inside scale. I'm about at 64 degrees, I would say. So I can say that this inside angle here is 64 degrees, right? Keep in mind that's not what we want, but we know a full, we can say a full circle is equal to 360 degrees, right? So if a full circle is equal to 360. We can find the part we want by just subtracting off the part we don't want. So 360 minus this 64 degrees, which is going to be 296. So we can fill in our angle on our diagram as 296. Don't forget your degree symbol to finish it off. So here are 6 questions for you to try. If you're just following along at home, I would just advise drawing a variety of angles that look similar, and that way when you're following along, you can just answer them for yourself. When you can pause the video now. Whenever you're ready, press play, and then we'll go through the answers together. Okay, welcome back. So as you can see, my angles worked out to the following. 32 degrees, 141, 33. Keep in mind, if you drew your own angles, they will differ, right? So just keep in mind, do they make logical sense? Is it less than a right angle? Is it an obtuse angle? What do I have to get for an obtuse angle? Question 4, you could also get somebody else to just check them for you. Question 4, notice I had the 86 degrees for my blue angle. I wanted to show this one because this is just on a straight line, right? So we know that the other side is 94, because 86 and 94 is 180, isn't it? And then if we look at 5, 240 degrees, which makes sense because it's over the 180. It's not quite 270, and it looks like it's kind of halfway-ish, which is close to 240. And then 320, it's pointing over as well, so it is in a different quadrant.